Hi everyone, this is Ellie. In response to demand and also just me getting bored, I've put together a basic Combat 101 guide, which is this one, and also a Combat 102 guide that touches on mostly ult gauge management. I feel like I've only touched on the foundations of manual combat in these videos, but I hope people will still find them helpful in understanding the logic. And basically everything I cover in these videos pertain to manual combat only. Auto is very dumb in my opinion, and the player can't control it anyway, so it's out of the picture here. So to start off, let's brush up on some terminology. Some terms that I use aren't the official words used in the game, so I do want to clarify what I mean. So when I say freeze, I mean incapacitate, which means the target cannot act, so it can't normal attack or ultimate during the round that it is incapacitated. Number two, dot or DOT, which is an official term in the game, means damage over time, and you can think of it as like poison or bleed in other games that maybe you've played. Third, there is effect hit rate, which I say a lot. It refers to accuracy in the game. So basically, the probability that a status hits and takes effect on the target. So, for example, if an Illustra skill has 31% probability to incapacitate a target, applying a 20% accuracy buff to it means the incapacitate now hits at 31 times 1.2 equals 37.2% probability. And number four, when I say normal attack, it's basically the single target attack we do when we're not ulting. I get a lot of questions about what attribute buffs and debuffs are. You can think of attributes as baseline values that a card inherently has. So things like attack or defense, crit rate, crit damage, ult gain rate, effect hit rate, effect dodge rate, etc. And this is different from statuses, which are things that cards don't inherently have, such as incapacitate or invincibility or dodge or things like that. So now moving on to preparation for battles. So first of all, briefly touching on the Illustras themselves. So each Illustra has 2 skills and an ultimate. A few Illustras have passives, but I won't be covering that here. The most important thing to prioritize when building an Illustra is leveling the Illustra to max level here. For SSRs, that'll be level 100. For SR pluses, that'll be 95. For SRs, 90. For Rs, 80. Always prioritize SSRs. One of the big reasons is the higher level cap I just mentioned and the higher base stats that come along with that. The second thing to prioritize is leveling your picturas, which is essentially equipment on your illustras. I cannot stress this enough. Please, please, please level your picturas. I guarantee you will have difficulties with combat if you don't invest in picturas, which give additional stats and also effects. And I have a detailed pictura guide on my Notion site, so I won't repeat the information here. And then regarding the skills and ultimate kind of details touching on those will be covered later in this video, so please continue watching. Another question I get a lot about is regarding the symbol that the card carries at the top right corner here. And so this indicates what type of Illustra it is. There are 4 types in the game: design, intensity, color, and emotion. And these mainly just deal with your team formation buff that you can find in formation. So for example, if I open up formation here, it says no bonuses here, but if you read this, it says when the number of Illustra of the same type in a team meets the condition, all Illustras in battle will obtain a buff. Intensity, which is the diamond-shaped one, increases attack. Emotion, which is the heart-shaped one, increases ultimate gain rate. And then color, which is that wheel-like one, increases ultimate damage. And the design, which is a triangle, increases healing received. So basically, for example here, I don't have any bonuses, but if I change the cards to, let's just say, the heart one. So notice how I have 3 cards that are the heart, so their emotion here. It'll say in the top left, this emotion symbol times 3, ultimate charge gain plus 6%. Now if I change more to more hearts times 4, ultimate charge gain plus 9%. And then 5, let me find it, okay, and plus 12%. So this is basically the team formation buff. This is definitely nice to have if you can manage to have that many cards on your team to suit that kind of condition. However, I think that the cards themselves are significantly more important than the team formation buff. So for example, if I only have 3 SSRs, or at least 3 SSRs built, and each of them is a different type of card, I don't want to switch out my 3 strongest cards for other weaker cards just to make the team formation buff work. I think it's a lower priority, and it's really only for min-maxing and like team optimization when you have sufficient number of cards that you can play around with this. Otherwise, you can ignore it for now. Just focus on the cards, the Illustras themselves. Another question that I get quite often is regarding the role that the card has. So the term that the game gives in the top right corner. And you can see here the role. So AoE, heal, support, single target, freeze, dot, whatever. Honestly, I think that the game often doesn't label this correctly anyways, so I wouldn't look at this. An example is Promise in the Box Clarence, which I think a lot of people know it is a very strong damage dealer, but it's labeled as support. and the game, or the card itself doesn't support anyone else other than itself. So I question why they're labeling this card as support, but that's just how the game is. So I wouldn't look at the label that they give. Rather, you need to focus on the skills and the ultimates of the card. So what exactly this card does in combat is way more important than any label or any type that the game gives it. Now, if we look at the formation setup, so the assist slot and the illustras can be moved around. I think at baseline, the assist slot is over here. You can move this up, and you can actually move the other cards around as well. So if you're a new player or you need help getting through combat, please borrow a strong assist and move it to an early slot on your team so it can really help you out. The order of illustras on the team matters. When you load into battle, the first 3 cards that appear are the first 3 from left to right that you put on your team. And then when one of these cards dies, the 4th card on your team will load into the rightmost slot, and so on and so forth. Ultimates are also released in order from left to right. I touch on the importance of order a lot more in depth in my Combat 102 guide, so make sure to check that out. On this topic, I do want to mention that if your team kills all enemies in a round before an Illustra gets the ultimate off, so for example, if your slot 2 card killed all enemies, your slot 3 card's ult will not occur that turn. And this applies to healers as well, so if you want to guarantee healing that turn, you may want to move your healer to an earlier place on the team. Also, something important is that pressing and holding on an Illustra can pull up the details in formation here. You can also change the pictures equipped on your Illustras directly from this formation page. What you do is go to Edit in the bottom left here, then tap on the picture that you want to change or unequipped. Pull up the selection here. After you finalize your pictures, make sure to press the Apply next to the Edit button here and hit Confirm. If you don't do this last step, the pictures you set won't actually be in effect, so make sure to do this. Once we've set up our team, we load into battle. In this section, I want to explain the interface of it. So in the top right corner, we have the settings here. This is mostly based on just your personal preference of kind of cinematics and what makes it most comfortable for you to play. The second button here is basically the speed. There's 2 options, so ×1 speed and ×2 speed. And the top right here, you can switch between auto and manual here like this. So for the illustrators, the red bar at the bottom of the card is the HP bar. It shows how healthy your card is. The gold bar underneath is the ult gauge. When the ult gauge is fully charged, your illustra will be able to use the ultimate, which is the larger square that pops up in the middle. Likewise, the purple bar on enemies is the HP bar, and the white bar beneath it is the ult gauge. And when the enemy's ult gauge is fully charged, it'll fire the ability that is noted when you press and hold on it. So on that topic, in battle, press and hold the illustras and enemies to see statuses and skills and ultimates. So for example, for enemies, press and hold on it. It will show you what its ultimate does, so basically what it does when the ult gauge is full, versus the bottom part here, which basically tells you what statuses are currently on that particular enemy. And you can note that they'll tell you how many remaining turns the status is active for, as well as the enemy's ultimate charge at the top right here, current ultimate charge. For illustras, likewise, press and hold on the individual skill icons, and this will give you the details on what these skills do. Press and hold on any other part of the card will show you what the illustra's ult does, and also the statuses if there are any. Because you'll be able to check anytime during battle, you don't need to memorize all the skills and ultimates and status icons and what they represent. Now, there is a large variety of skills. When a status is applied to both your team or enemies, a symbol will appear on the top right of your cards. So for example, if I do this, it'll show a top right icon here, or the bottom left of the enemy's ult gauge bar. Sometimes statuses last multiple turns, and you can see how many turns left on the small number at the bottom right of the symbol. If you see a 1, that means this turn is the last turn that the status is effective, and so on and so forth. Now, regarding skills and ultimates, before I get to anything else, I need to emphasize that ultimates cannot crit. Any crit rate buffs or crit damage buffs will not be applied on the ultimates because they cannot crit. In fact, this game's crit values are not definitive. They don't even give you like the baseline crit rate and crit damage for illustras, and they vary across cards. So in general, crit is not a preferred attribute to prioritize. Now I'll touch on ultimates. So often a card's ultimate deals damage or heals and has an ult effect. So for example, if I'm taking Strawberry Sundae here, the ult itself is a heal all illustras for whatever HP, and then the ult effect is the increase their defense by whatever % for 2 turns apart. Leveling the ultimate will not change the base effect of it, meaning it won't do something entirely different at higher levels. It'll just be stronger or more reliable. So for example, Strawberry Sundae at ult level 6 is not suddenly going to do damage. It doesn't work like that. And you can level the ultimate using duplicate copies of the same Illustra or feeding it enlightenments. Now, these enlightenments are very scarce resources, so please be cautious about using them. If I remember correctly, a free-to-play getting an SSR from Ult 1 to Ult 6 takes about 7 to 8 months. In terms of evaluating what ultimates are worth leveling, it usually comes down to number one, does the ult effect increase proportionally or remarkably when leveled? Number two, if this card is a damage dealer, is the ult damage multiplier at least decent? So regarding point number one, for example, General Alcade at ult 1 has a 5% attack buff, while at ult 6 it's 25%. This is a significant increase, which is why I said this card is reliant on ult levels for decent damage. Leveling skills will not change the core effect, just like the ultimate. Leveling them up only makes the base effect stronger. So for example, in this case, increasing the attack buff from 20% to 40% occur at a higher probability, for example, the resurrection probability from 40% to 58%, and lower the cooldown of the skill. Although some skills may be very important, if you're a new player, the resources are hard to come by, and I wouldn't recommend touching the skills until you've leveled the Illustra itself. Please remember that the Illustra level is always your top priority. If you're unsure how important a certain skill is, make sure to read the description and use your judgment, and you can also use my Illustra guides as references. So the vast majority of skills aren't direct ways to deal damage, but rather provide some sort of utility. Of note, most skills are immediate release, meaning they are used as soon as you press the skill and then press the target. And this is different from normal attacks and ultimates where you need to press the attack button at the bottom right. Also, a significant factor that motivated me to make this video is because I've seen players who want to make the transition to being able to play manually, but they're stumped by when they're supposed to use the skills. Here, I'm going to mention a few different types of skills you want to prioritize and when to use them. So number one is a skill that offers you a proportional damage increase. So for example, some percentage attack buff or percentage ultimate damage buff. So often the skills that give you a flat attack bonus, or sorry, a flat damage bonus, like this one here, these aren't as desirable. And in that same vein, percentage defense reduction is also a very valuable skill to upgrade, as this boosts your Illustra's damage output, sometimes very significantly. In situations like these, you'd want to time the damage buffs so that they'll be active when your main damage dealer ults. For example, the attack buff from Orange Milkshake lasts for 2 turns, and also the flat damage bonus from Tangled Vines also lasts for 2 turns. So I want to use these damage boosting skills when I know that within these 2 turns, my main damage dealer, which is Stellaris in this case, will have its ult ready. And as you can see, the ult gauge on my Stellaris is almost full, so I know that the ult will likely be ready the next turn. So I'm going to use the attack, or I'm going to use the damage boosts now, so that they'll be effective when my Stellaris will ult.
Okay.
And as you can see, my Stellaris ult is now ready, and it still has the attack boost and bonus damage from both Orange Milkshake and Tangled Vines. Keep in mind that there are some damage boosting skills that only last 1 turn. So for example, Stellaris' skill 2 is an ultimate damage buff that only lasts for 1 turn, which means it only exists for this current turn. So I'm going to use this skill right now to boost my Stellaris even more.
Okay.
So right now, if you click or if you press and hold on Stellaris, you'll see that it currently has 3 buffs on it. The attack buff from Orange Milkshake, the flat bonus damage from Tangled Vines, and also the ultimate damage buff from itself. And this is the exact same logic as using defense reduction skills. You want to be able to time the defense reduction so that they coordinate well with the ultimates of your main damage dealers. This also applies to ults that provide team-wide damage buffs or defense reduction to the enemies. You want to have these Illustras early on your team so that your next few cards can benefit from these bonuses. And this is why I always suggest placing Coconut Lars before any other damage dealer on your team, so that Coconut's defense reduction on the ult can boost teammates' damage. The second type of skill that I want to mention is charging skills, meaning they increase the Illustra's ult gauge. This means your cards will be able to ult faster, and this is also why I always recommend building initial ult charge Pictura sets. And I'll touch more on ult gauge management in my Combat 102 guide. The third type of skill that I want to mention is the type that includes control, so for example, incapacitate or disabling enemies' ult, etc., or ones with critical utility, such as resurrection or invincibility, because often leveling these skills will increase the probability that the status hits the target, and also since leveling will shorten the cooldown, you'll be able to use these skills more often. These are a bit more complicated to explain when to use because of the variety of statuses in the game. I suggest thinking about your current goal in the combat and matching the skill with it. So for example, if your Illustra is very close to dying, you want to use the resurrection skill on it. If a low HP powerful enemy is about to ult and your incapacitate skill is up, use it on that enemy and try to focus all your damage on it to kill it. So just things like that. And number four, certain survivability skills. Usually you want to level skills that give you damage reduction or healing. Of note, defense buffs on Illustras are not good and should not be prioritized. Certain enemies have very hard hitting normal attacks for which you may want to use the damage reduction skills as soon as possible to mitigate these. And other enemies' normal attacks don't hurt but have powerful ults, so you'd want to save the damage reduction skills for when these enemies ult. And lastly, number five, some skills can't really be categorized and they offer more of a situational solution. So, for example, Eden Swing skill 2 here cleanses dot, and it's really only useful when enemies apply heavy dot. Or, for example, Promise Clearance's skill 2 reduces accuracy of enemies and gives dot immunity, which would only be effective in very specific situations. Other examples include when enemies have dodge, you'd want to bring an Illustrator that can ignore, dispel, dodge, or when enemies can apply incapacitate, you may want to bring an Illustrator that can cleanse or give immunity to incapacitate. So these are all specific situations. I can't list them all here because there's so many statuses in the game, but hopefully you understand the logic. And that'll be all for this basic combat guide. Regarding ult gauge management, make sure to check out my Combat 102 guide. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe.